Hello, welcome to Umbraco Fest user group. Arnold, I don't think we can hear you. You appear to be on mute. Do you want to have another try, or we can press on and I can introduce otherwise? Nope. Technical problems. The one thing that's ever present in the virtual landscape. Quite used to you are on mute, must be the phrase of 2020 and 2021. So Arnold, you try and work out your sound, and I'll introduce our next episode. So we are super excited to host another Azure Snacks. We have this is our second episode, and we are going to be welcoming a guest, Jay Gordon, today. Hello, Jay.
Hello, how are you?
Oh, we don't have sound from Jay either, or is it just me that can't hear?
I've got my microphone on.
I think it's the reactor stream. Jay's working for Hank. Fantastic. Not for me, but working for Hank. We'll make do. We'll work it out, Jay. I'll do a brief introduction. I've been reading all about you this morning, so if you can give me a nod or a wave if I get anything wrong. So you're a
Okay.
Microsoft advocate with a huge focus on community. I was looking at your weekly stream on Twitch, the Azure what's it called? Azure
Fun
Fun
bites.
Bites. I was going to say Azure Snacks, and that's us, and I don't want to mix up the two.
Can you hear me now?
Um, that looks fun. So Azure Fun Bites is something that you run every single week. Is that right?
Yeah.
Lots and lots
Every
of
week
guests. It's
I
been
run
running
it.
for some time. You also organised the DevOps Days, an event to help people make the most of their cloud experience and to welcome other guests with similar interests, which sounded fantastic. And that was back in 2020. Any plans for another event?
In the future, it's really up in the air with everything that's going on with COVID protocols. So what we're doing is making sure that what we do is right for all the community. We don't want to have a big event, but we're kind of weirded out by virtual stuff right now. I think a lot of
Cool.
people are. So, we're making our way and figuring out when the next DevOps Days New York City will be.
So today we're going to be looking at Azure SQL, which is fantastic. And Jay, I'm going to hand over to you and you can start talking. And then at the end of the session, we'll have time for a Q&A. So if you can ask your questions, I'll be happy to ask Jay your questions at the end. Over to you, Jay.
Thank you very much, Emma. I appreciate it. Cool. So, hey, my name is Jay Gordon. I'm a cloud advocate with Microsoft. My days are spent here in Brooklyn, New York, talking to people about the benefits of Azure. And that's what we're going to do today. Let's go over today's agenda really quickly. I'm going to do an introduction, which I'm doing right now, an Azure SQL history, Azure SQL deployment options, purchasing model, service tiers, and hardware choices, management interfaces for Azure SQL, and then we'll summarize things. Sound good? So let's get to the intro. Many organizations have an aging or under-engineered data platform strategy. There's been a significant trend of moving existing systems to the cloud, building new applications quickly with the cloud, and offloading some of the on-prem costs. So you need to plan how to move your workloads into the cloud, and you need to understand how to set up your organization for success. So you need to understand the role of the DBA or the data professional. It stays the same and changes what you'll have to make. So we're going to start with a brief history of Microsoft's behind creating Azure SQL, and then we'll learn about some of the various deployment methods. And these options will include Azure SQL Database, Azure SQL Managed Instance, and SQL Server. In a VM environment. We'll talk a little bit about platform as a service and how that differentiates between using that VM. So let's get into a little bit of history. Let's take a history lesson. We'll go way, way back. And so software and services for relational databases have been a large part of the Microsoft product offering over the years. Before you learn about Azure SQL, where it's going, let's briefly consider where it started. And in 2008, at the Microsoft Professionals Developer Conference, Microsoft Chief Software Architect at the time, Ray Ozzie, announced the new cloud computing operating system. It was Windows Azure. And one of the 5 key components of Azure Services Platform on launch was Microsoft SQL Services. From the beginning, SQL had been a large part of Azure. SQL Azure was created to provide a cloud-hosted version of SQL Server. Windows Azure was later renamed to Microsoft Azure, and SQL Azure was renamed to Azure SQL. I know one the other one. We bring it all over, but bring it together. So both have since dramatically expanded services since launch. Since that launch, the capabilities around security, performance, availability, and scale have been enhanced greatly. Azure SQL has evolved over the years to include Azure VMs, managed instances, and several options for databases. There are now multiple deployment options that have the flexibility to scale your needs, and there have been more than 7 million deployments of Azure SQL. The architecture for Azure SQL has been evolved to meet the growing demands of applications. For example, the architecture introduced in the 2014 set the stage for new possibilities like elastic database pools, vCore choices, business critical deployments, hyperscale, and serverless architectures. So 2008, SQL Server, Azure SQL, they both have evolved since then to become a more available, scalable, and performant to meet the needs and demands of any application. So let's talk about Azure SQL deployments, okay? Within the umbrella of Azure SQL platform, there are many deployment options and choices that you need to meet your needs. These options give you the flexibility to get and pay for exactly what you need. Here, we'll cover some of the considerations you need to make when you choose various Azure SQL deployment options. We'll cover some of the tech specifications of each of these options, and we'll talk about the deployment options discussed. So we'll be talking about SQL Server on virtual machines, Azure SQL Managed Instance, Azure SQL Database, Azure SQL Managed Instance Pools, and the Azure SQL Elastic Database Pools. So SQL Server on a virtual machine is exactly what it sounds like. It's just SQL Server. All your SQL Server skills need to be used here. However, you can use services via Azure to help automate backups, use patching via the OS, apart from the SQL Server security patches. And you have the full capabilities of SQL Server. So you'll be able to deploy specific SQL and operating system versions from gallery images on Azure. You'll be able to consider memory optimized or storage optimized virtual machines for max performance. You'll use the right configuration to take advantage of blob storage. For read caching, you'll integrate your virtual machines to on-premises networks so you can create hybrid solutions. Take advantage of automated backups to blob storage, and integration with Azure Backup. Always on failover cluster instances are supported with Azure Premium File Share, and always on availability groups is supported using Cloud Witness. So SQL Server on virtual machine is considered infrastructure as a service. And the other deployment options in Azure SQL platform, Azure SQL Managed Instance, and Azure SQL Database are platform as a service deployments. These PaaS Azure SQL deployment options contain fully managed database engine that automates most of the database management functions like upgrading, patching, backups, and monitoring. Here's some of the key features. Business continuity enables your continue operating in the face of disruption, high availability, one of the best SLAs on the planet. Guarantees your databases are up and running 99.99% of the time. So no need to worry about those maintenance or downtimes. Backups are automated, and you can use Azure Read Access geo-redundant storage to provide geo-redundancy, and then long-term backup retention. Very, very important. Back those up to 10 years. That's really big if you have some sort of compliance within your organization that you need to store data for a long period of time, or that's just your backups. Geo-replication creates readable replicas, so you can have them in the same data center or in a different one, so you can really scale your availability. Scalability easily allows you to add more resources like CPU, memory, without the long provisioning associated with going ahead and acquiring those things and putting them together, say, in a data center. Network security features protect your data over the network. So you'll be able to use services like Private Link to ensure your data isn't exposed on the internet, and using VNets to integrate with your on-premise deployments. Those advanced security features detect threats and vulnerabilities in your databases and enables you to secure data. These are also really, really important options right here, I think. Automatic tuning, where it'll analyze the workload. So if you have a lot going on with your database, it'll help optimize performance of applications by adding indexes, removing the unused ones, and automatically fixing those query plan problems. Built-in monitoring. We need to figure out what's going on, and we get insights to be able to troubleshoot performance problems and look at what our workload is doing to the actual hardware. And then built-in intelligence, it automatically identifies potential problems in your workload and provides recommendations that can help you fix them. So versionless SQL is an additional significant difference between infrastructure as a service and platform as a service. So unlike the infrastructure as a service, which is tied to a specific SQL version like SQL Server 2019, SQL Database and SQL Managed Instance are versionless. The main branch of the SQL engine code base powers SQL Server 2019, SQL Database, and SQL Managed Instance. So although my SQL Server versions come out every few years, the platform as a service allows Microsoft to continually update those SQL databases and instances. So when a new feature is developed, some customers are granted access early before they're available in private previews, and these new features then become available in public previews. Public previews allow everyone to access the new feature, but there's typically a difference in the pricing. It's a little cheaper. Or it could be free. We've got services that do that. So SQL Managed Instance is a platform as a service deployment of Azure SQL. It gives you an instance of SQL Server, but removes much of the overhead of managing a virtual machine. So most of the features SQL Server are available in an SQL Managed Instance. The option's ideal for customers who still want to use instance scope features and want to move to Azure without re-architecting their applications. You have SQL Server Agent, Server Broker, Common Language Runtime, Database Mail, Link Servers, and Machine Learning Services Preview. SQL Managed Instance also allows you to have access in instance scope features, but you don't have to worry about that, or you don't have access to the OS or the infrastructure beneath. Komatsu migrated 1.5 terabytes of data thanks to the compatibility with SQL Server, and that meant 49% in cost reduction and 25 to 30% in performance gains. SQL Database is a platform as a service deployment option of Azure SQL that abstracts both the OS and the SQL. So you can also refer to it as a database as a service. The deployment option lets you get a database and just start developing applications right away. You'll be able to support a number of different scenarios that require unlimited database storage, auto scaling for unpredictable workloads, and has the industry's highest availability SLA, 99.995. Industry-only business continuity with SLA for 5-second recovery point objective and a 30-second recovery time objective. Great pricing options for mission-critical workloads. AccuWeather, which is a huge weather service. We use it a ton here in the States. They use Azure SQL database to provide an automated, scalable weather prediction service. Elastic pools allow you to host many databases within a single set of provisioned SQL database resources. This option is ideal for software as a service application like Umbraco, or a provider because you can manage and monitor performance in a simplified way for many databases. Instance pools allow you to host managed instances and share resources. So you can pre-provision compute resources. You can also reduce overall deployment time to make migrations easier. You can also host smaller managed instances in an instance pool, so you can have a single managed instance. And this offering is currently in public preview. So let's summarize again the deployment options for Azure SQL. We have the SQL virtual machines option, where we're just installing SQL Server, whatever version you want on the specific operating system you want. There are images that are already available so that you can go ahead and select one and say, I want to just provision Windows 2016 with, say, Azure SQL 2019. You can do that. Managed instances, they're the best for lift and shift migrations to the cloud, giving you some of those features that you would have in a standard SQL installation, but also allow for management by Azure. And then straight database services or databases, best for the modern cloud applications, hyperscale, serverless options. You'll have the single database with hyperscale storage up to 100 terabytes, and elastic pool, which, like I said, resource sharing between multiple databases to optimize your pricing. So let's take quickly a look at purchasing model, service tiers, and hardware choices. So after you have an idea of which deployment's best for you and your requirements, you need to actually determine the purchasing model, the service tier, and the hardware that you want to use for your deployment. So the Azure SQL purchasing model provides two main options, and we're going to mostly talk about vCore, but there's also database transaction units, and that's a relative to sign to the relative power assigned to the database. So that's a blended measure of the CPU, the read-write rates, and it compares power across performance levels. We recommend the vCore model because it allows you to independently select compute and storage resources. The DTU model is a bundled measure of compute. In the vCore model, you pay for compute resources, so that's the service tier, and plus the number of vCores, the amount of memory, and the generation of hardware. The type and amount of data and log storage you choose, backup storage, you can use read access geo-redundant storage. And the vCore model also allows you to use hybrid benefit for Azure SQL Server and reserve capacity to save money. Neither of those options of cost savings are available with DTU. So there's three main service tiers that you need to recognize for availability. General purpose, that's suitable for most business workloads. If you're running an Umbraco site and you just need to be able to provide it, but you're not worried about huge upticks in, connections, it's a good idea for you. Business critical, let's say that you have an Umbraco server that is a huge portion of your entire business. There's tons of information there. This offers the highest resilience and several isolated replicas. And this is the only one that can use in-memory OLTP to improve performance. Hyperscale. Now, hyperscale is if you need to store lots and lots of data and have it in read scale requirements. So performance, cost perspective, this is falls in between those two prior models that I mentioned, general purpose and business critical. The default hardware generation at this time is referred to Gen 5. Gen 4 hardware still exists, but it will reach end of life. As technology advances, you'll be able to expect some hardware optimizations as well. For example, the FSV2 series is compute optimized and the M series is memory optimized. Those options recently became available in public preview for Azure SQL Database. If you choose general purpose within SQL Database, you'll want to use the serverless compute tier. Gen 5 hardware is currently the only option, and it can scale up to 16 vCores. The purchasing model, service tier, and hardware selections will have a significant impact on performance, availability, and the cost of your deployment. Let's just take a quick look at management interfaces for Azure SQL. There are things that you're going to need to do to deploy, use, and manage your resources. You'll use a variety of different tools and interfaces, and we'll look at some of them right now. Azure Portal provides a broad set of features for Azure SQL resources, including virtual machines, managed instances, and databases. And through the portal, you can deploy, administrate, and even connect to those databases. SQL Server Management Studio, it's the most popular, well-known tool in the world as far as managing SQL. You can utilize that. Azure Data Studio, it's an open source cross-platform tool. I'm going to show you that in just a little bit. And because all of these services on Azure SQL are based on the SQL Server engine, Azure SQL supports Transact SQL language and TDS, the Tabular Data Stream Protocol. So all the drivers that normally work with SQL Server, they're going to work with Azure SQL. You can utilize REST APIs for management of your instances in SQL. There's CLI interfaces like SQL SMD, BCP, they're supported, and also Azure CLI. Azure CLI is another cross-platform command line utility. You can utilize that to manage your databases and create them, delete them, resize them, all through the CLI. So these are the main ones that you can work with. Many capabilities are available in all these interfaces. Which one you choose will depend on the combination of preference and what you're trying to accomplish. All right. So we're going to close up because I want to actually show you some of this. We did a lot of talking. I did a lot of telling, and I'm going to do some showing next. So to learn more about the history of SQL, the options, the models, the management tools, I have some resources for you to take a look at. So let's take a moment. You can screenshot this. You can watch the keynote that Ray Ozzie had back in 2008 to actually find out how SQL on Azure got started. So aka.ms PDC SQL 2008, you can go to that short link. You can learn more about all the different types of PaaS capabilities. You can go to these two short links. I'll go ahead. I'll give you a second to screenshot it. You got it? Cool. Next, if you want to find out more about purchasing models, service tiers, you might want to learn more. Go ahead. You can take a screenshot of this. You can learn more about the DTU model, which we just talked about briefly, and then the vCore model, which, like I said, tends to be the more popular one. The documentation will go deeper into the different types of architectures and various service tiers that you might be wanting to find out about. Every Thursday at 11 a.m. Pacific time US, 2 p.m. Eastern time on Microsoft Learn TV, I do a show. It's called Azure Fun Bites. And every week we get together, we talk about all the different services, products, and even complementary products that make up a great Azure experience. So join me every Thursday, 11 a.m. Pacific. You can find out more on Twitter at Azure Fun Bites. And so that's our main presentation. I'm going to go into a demo for a little bit, and I want to show you exactly how this service looks. So give me 1 second so I can make some adjustments here and share a different screen. Thanks again, like I mentioned, for watching this. I really appreciate you taking some time out of your day and giving me some of your time. Cool. So let's take a look at what we've got here. I've already created an Umbraco database setup. You can see I've got my login here. Let's go ahead. That's my email address, jagord@microsoft.com. If you'd like to get in touch with me after, you've got my email now. So I've already configured this, and during the setup of Umbraco, it gave me the ability to select an SQL server. I'm going to show you a little bit about that. And then I'm also going to talk about if you wanted to actually look at the database using Azure Data Studio, or if you wanted to migrate to that database using the Data Migration Assistant. Sound good? Cool. Well, I've gone ahead, in the settings, I've gone ahead and configured everything to utilize this service. I've created content. I've got an image up here. I created a blog post. It wasn't very interesting, but it certainly is a blog post. And as we know, it all gets rendered into something that looks like this. And eventually, it's all stored in our database. So let's take a quick look at what we can do. To create a database, all you need to do is go here into the search bar, click Azure SQL Databases. You can click New. This is so we can create the database as a service model of a database. All we need to do here is create a database name. We'll call it DB demo 123. We pick exactly the server we want. I've already created one, but if we want to create a new one, this will actually create the underlying SQL server. So we give it a name that gets put into a fully qualified domain name. We give it a login. So user 1112. Give it a password. Some random password here. Always love to type it and do it live. Great. And then eventually we pick our location. These are all the different regions that are available to you, including all of these in Europe. But I'm in East US, and so that's what I'm going to pick. So I'll click OK. Next, we can go to networking. We can see the different types of connectivity methods. So if we want no access to it, it'll be completely closed and something we're just working with via, say, just a tool in the portal. We'll leave it to no access. We can create a public endpoint that'll allow firewall rules for public access. We can actually whitelist Azure services, and I can even whitelist my current IP address. Private endpoints allows me to add what's a private connection between, say, an existing resource on a virtual network. So that's really useful if we want to keep our access scoped right onto just Azure private networks. Security, there's Azure Defender SQL. It'll work as a package to look at vulnerability assessments, advanced threat protection. It's a cost offering. You can either use the free trial. There's some additional settings related to whether or not you want to start with a blank database, a backup of an existing database. So if you want to restore a backup, you can go into the backup section. I don't have any right now. Or you can use a sample database. This AdventureWorks LT. You can then see the database collation here. Add tags, and these tags are just identifiers. They may be useful for you to set, say, what the environment is. So if you want to say environment, you can say prod. Okay. And then what we do is click review and create. And what we can do is download templates for automation so that in the future, what we can do is just utilize Azure Resource Manager. We can add it to our library. We can just deploy it. Now, I've already deployed a database, so I'm just going to go back and I'm going to show you it. Sound good? So if we go here into this database, you'll see it's in this resource group, Umbraco Demo Snacks. And so I have the Umbraco CMS installed on a Azure web app service instance. That's what this is. This is the service plan. And then what we actually have is our Umbraco demo database. So the server, the underlying server, the place that we actually can create databases, new elastic pools, new dedicated pools. Here's where we would go take a look at our backups, find failover groups, look at security settings. Here's our automatic tuning so that we can go and configure a force plan, a create index. So it's inherited from this default. So I can go ahead and click this on, click deploy, and then it'll go ahead and create those indexes where it sees it's needed. There are also recommendations so that what we can do is look at some offerings and find out exactly what recommendations are made. Firewalls, virtual networks, being able to specify what IP that we're actually on and being able to connect to it. That's really useful. Adding virtual networks so that if we want to integrate, say, a hybrid solution, we've got a private link configured, we can do that. Those private endpoint connections, if we have them, we can add them in here. All these are really useful. We can look at the actual databases that we've got here, the pricing tier. So here we are now. I've clicked on it. Now we're actually in the database server's specific database that we're going to be working with. So now we're scoped to a particular database within the server. And so let's take a look at the options. We can take a look at the compute and storage that have been provisioned for this. We can use these different compute tiers, serverless, specify our max cores that we want. So you can just use the slider, the minimum cores for when it's auto scaling. If there's an active period, what we can do is pause our database, and that'll help reduce the amount of cost that we have. And you can make the database zone redundant. So it'll provide you that availability by spreading it across a number of availability zones. On our side here, we can actually get our estimated cost a month. So now what we want to do is look a little bit more. We can see analytics. We can create specific analytics jobs to be able to take a look at what it is that's happening. We can add Azure Search, a service that will actually allow you to create a fully indexed search of your content. Auditing, really, really important. Tracking all those events that happen, another big part of compliance that you may need to work with. Security Center, recommendations on security from our service that recommends if there's anything that you need to do as far as firewall changes, something like that. Automatic tuning, like I said, it'll be on the specific database rather than the server. Right now, it's inheriting all of our permissions for that from the server, the place we saw before. So how do I connect all this? Connection strings right here. And in the connection string section, we see ADO, JDBC, ODBC, PHP, Go. We have all these examples. And then if you need to use a Go driver for SQL Server, there's a link to it right here. And so let's take a look at how that connection string would be utilized here. What's great about this Umbraco demo snacks on the actual web app service is if I want to quickly take a look at how it's configured, we can go here to configuration. And we can see that I've got my connection string right here at the bottom. I'll make it a little bigger for you. This connection string right here, it's default hidden, but this is actually the fully set up database connection string, and it's managed within here in this configuration area. So you can add additional configuration connection strings. You can add application settings if you need, say, different variables. You can see we've got our different variables and the different hidden values, so they're not automatically viewable by default. We can set up those custom domains if we need to. So if you have a company website, you can specify it here. TLS, SSL. So we have our SSL configured domain name by default. You can see here, right there, there's the lock. It's already done. So let's take a look at the configuration in Umbraco. So we'll go back, and what's really great is we have an app service editor. You don't really want to use this to make direct changes. You want to use, say, the repo that's like configured for this. Makes a lot of sense than to do it on your own. But we'll go in here, and I just want to show you this service. I think this is great. It's really useful for people who are administrating the actual web app itself. And so let's go into our web.config, and our database is configured in here. We've got our configurations, our string in here in our connection strings. I don't want to show my password or anything like that, so there it is. All of these settings, health checks, all that's right in here, so you can default look at it. Our app data, cache, all that, you can see it's all visible there. So now let's go ahead and let's take a look at it from Azure Data Studio. So this is Azure Data Studio. It allows us to actually connect from our local machine. I'll go ahead and I'll put in my password. And now I'm connected to the service. I can see there's the version of SQL that I'm working off, the Azure SQL DB. We can go ahead and take a look at our databases, specifically the Embraco DB. Let's take a look at the tables, and you can see that all of our tables are here. So we can just select the top 1,000 entries on this particular SQL table, and then look at it. And here's all the information that's actually stored for our Embraco web. And so one kind of final portion that we can do is, what if we want to move from, say, a virtual machine into this hosted service? Well, what we can do is click New, and we can do an assessment. And so this is installed on the actual server that I'm going to be migrating from. I'm just going to call it DB MIG123. We can do an assessment first. And that assessment will go ahead and look at the database we're moving from and making sure we can actually move it. So you can see I'm just going to use localhost and Windows authentication. I'll click connect. I'll pick the database that I want to create, or I should say migrate. We'll start an assessment. And now what we'll see is the features that are actually available. Now, if I had an Azure migrate service available, and that's over in here. Azure Migrate is a hosted service that allows you to move SQL servers, Linux servers, web apps, data boxes. You can move all these using this hosted service. If we wanted to upload this assessment to there and then have it stored there so we can take a look at it, that's all available. Now, if we want to actually do a migration, we click the plus again, we click migration, we give it a name, DB MIG1234. We can pick the source server type, Azure SQL Server, the target server type, Azure SQL Database. We'll go ahead and say whether we want to move the schema and data, the schema only, or the data only. We'll click create. We'll connect to our source server. That's this one right here that we're currently on. And then I'll just use Windows authentication. I'll make sure it's done by a secure connection. Click connect. Here's my database, the compatibility level, which is a score that was created. We can do an assessment before we actually move. We don't need to. Now we'll pick where we're actually going to be moving it to. I'll move it to this server, that we created. That is this database with this configuration string host name. We'll go ahead and give our password. Connect. And now you can see it'll pull up the database, the single target that we want to move to. It'll prepare the schema. It'll create an SQL script after it looks at all the different database tables that it's going to be moving and any specific SQL users. Then it'll create the script itself, and allow you to deploy. So if you have your Embraco database on something already, you want to bring it over, you can do that. You'll deploy the schema, you'll select tables, and then you'll migrate your data over. And so just to kind of wrap everything up, if you'd like to get a lot more information on Azure SQL, really recommend you go to the Azure Fundamentals learning path within Microsoft Learn. It's free. These are free trainings that you can use. You can go through it, get all the deployment option information. After this, you can actually take an additional fundamentals learning path that'll actually allow you to deploy and utilize all these services. And it does it within a sandbox, so you're not spending any money. And then finally, if you want to find me on Twitter, it's a great place to be able to stay in touch. I'm always here. I'm always here. And then also you can follow Azure Fun Bites on Twitter. My last show was recently on Azure Static Web Apps. I had actually, there's a new blog post that's going up on the Azure DevOps blog of when I did an actual show with Hank. So that's pretty much it. I think I've jammed a lot of information in the last 45 minutes for you. And I think I'm ready to kind of see if there's any questions that I can answer, or if you just wanted to chit chat.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you so much. It's I managed to hear you, and I can say it's a lot better when I can actually hear the person that's presenting. You did jam an awful lot in 45 minutes. Yeah.
I appreciate that.
There's,
I like it when people can hear me. It ends up making the whole communication process a lot easier.
Just a little easier, isn't it? Because before I was just waiting for your lips to stop moving and to see when you'd finished answering a question, which is a way.
I haven't learned Morse code yet, and one of these days I'm going to take a lesson on signing. But until then, I'm just going to have to keep using the mouth.
And hopefully the technology will let us. So incredible session. The demo was fantastic as well. Just the ease with which you can spin up a database, beautifully demonstrated. A look at the analytics as well, right there, just in the dashboard. Super cool. And the security checks, I didn't know that was a feature, so I'm really glad to see that. I love the app service editor. Whenever I see that it's in preview, I think I shouldn't really muck around too much in here, but it's exactly what I use it for, is to look at the web config, see what's set up in there, and just wonderful. We've got some really good questions actually, so sure, I will take you through them. And just another huge thank you, Jay. Okay, so the first question we had in: if I have several test databases in Azure SQL, can I easily turn off the charge for those databases when I do not need to do testing?
Yes, you can use that serverless model that I discussed before. And what it'll do is, if it doesn't have access after, say, I think it said 5 minutes or something, you can tune that. It'll pause the database, which will reduce charges. The other option that you can do is, because you can do end-to-end creation using Azure Resource Manager, what I like to recommend people do is, if you're just doing temporary testing, just spin up the database, create it, and then destroy it when you're done. If you're just importing the same database that you've backed up each time, you can just utilize an import script that'll say, after we boot up, let's go ahead, let's import our database. Now let's do our work, let's do our tests, and then let's destroy it so that we don't have any charges after.
Yeah, and we've seen how simple it is just to import that database actually in your session, so makes perfect sense.
And you don't have to do it via the portal. Like I said, you can script the creation through an Azure Resource Manager template, or you can utilize that CLI. So if you have a little, say, script, like a PowerShell script on your computer, or if you're like me and you like Bash, you can utilize a little Bash script to say, okay, let's create our new instance. Let's call it this variable for our server name, things like that.
Cool. Okay. Makes perfect sense to me. So next question is, can we change or switch between DTU and vCore easily? And second part, is there any option to auto scale up and down and in and out like with app service?
I believe that you basically choose a specific model, and if you change between those two models, there's going to be a bit of a downtime period. At least that's what I believe. What was the second question again?
So is there an option to scale up and down, in and out, just like with app services?
Yeah, you can use those models that I mentioned before, like hyperscale.
Mm.
And hyperscale will create a new compute that you need to be able to actually get things up and running, so that if you need to expand, it can, and then you can use different sorts of analytics to be able to reduce. So whatever metrics exist that you can see, if you have, like, say, 75% utilization and you think you're going to need more, you can go ahead and specify that. You can do that all automatically. There's tons of documentation out there that you can look at, but Azure SQL Hyperscale is the one that you'd like to work with.
Fantastic. We love documentation as well. If the documentation's there, we can do it, right? As devs, if it's there, we can then do it.
I
Okay,
have to
so
double
next
check
question.
on that DTU CPU thing. If
Mhm.
you ask the question, follow up with me on Twitter, whoever you are, at JDestro, easiest place to get in touch with me, and I will double and triple check whether that is available. So thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Joe. So the next question is, we have physical, not virtualized SQL servers on premise. We'd like to move the workload into a SQL managed instance. And how do we approach
Mhm.
understanding what compute resource, like the number of vCores, etc., are required? So how do you make that
You know,
assessment?
there are those assessment tools that I gave a quick view to, and those assessment tools will help you understand the direct correlation between how much hardware you're currently using as opposed to the hardware that you're going to need. So there's
Mm,
a ton of information on the specific available versions of the different types of hardware that are there. And what you can do is kind of use the assessment tool, but also use some common sense. So if you're
mm,
currently using, say, like a 24 vCore server or VM on your existing on-prem, or it's actually just on a bare metal server, um, you can always take a look and see what's actually utilized or underutilized on that server, and then kind of make a determination of what makes the most sense. So you may not
mm,
need a one-for-one lift and shift type of setup. You may be able to, say, reduce the entire size of the hardware you need, because you probably are in a situation where maybe underutilized in the physical model.
mm. There's also the question of what you take with you as well. Like, is it when you're shifting, it's a good time to look at what you need, like in terms of your database. There's
Absolutely.
no time like a shift to make that assessment. But common sense is always going
Yeah,
to be the approach to.
I just did a session with Damian Brady on a show we have called the DevOps Lab. And in the DevOps Lab, we started doing an entire series of videos called On-Prem to the Cloud. And in On-Prem to the Cloud, and this could be very, very relevant for your users, we actually go through an entire process of moving an application out of a data center all the way into native Azure services. We start off with a lift and shift scenario, but then eventually we go from just importing our SQL server from a VM to a VM into using a SQL Azure SQL instance database. So by doing that, we actually show each individual step. We show the different database migration tools and the assessment tools. So if you want that newest episode, I think comes out on the 19th. and you'll
Cool.
be able to see me do that particular thing. But if you want to watch all the other previous episodes, just go on YouTube and look up On-Prem to the Cloud.
That's fantastic. Thanks for that. The 19th, that will be out. So anyone that's watching and is interested in watching it live, watching it happen, that's on the 19th. Fab. Couple more, two more questions, or one
Sure.
question with two parts.
Okay.
So which
Do my best.
SQL Azure, we'll work it out as we go. Which is your SQL deployment do you recommend for using microservices? Then there's some information after, so I'm going to add this too. Contemplating that microservices need one instance per service, and that the lower the costs, the better.
Yeah,
So,
I think the
yeah.
Elastic Pool for SQL makes the most sense. Like we mentioned, Elastic Pool allows you
Yeah.
to go across and have a number of databases on a single instance. So in a microservices situation, I think that would be the most that would make the most sense. A managed instance or a VM version probably wouldn't really be most cost effective. Those are more kind of static resources, if you will. Whereas,
Mm-hmm.
the Azure SQL service, it allows for you to kind of create, destroy, and work a little bit more dynamically in a serverless environment. So as you create your microservices, you can set up in a specific SQL server pool the databases that you need.
Brilliant. And the second part was, do we really need one SQL instance for each microservice?
No, like I said, using that Elastic Pool, I think, is
Just
your
use the
best
pool.
bet. You can just
Yeah.
create individual databases within that Elastic Pool.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Jay. Well, that brings us to the end of our
You're welcome.
questions. That was a super cool session, Jay. Thank you so much for coming along. We're all going to go over to Azure Snacks Cafe afterwards. So
Mhm.
if you do have other questions, feel free to come along. And I'm going to hand back to Arnold, who I will now be able to hear, which is wonderful. And just say a massive thank you, Jay.
I'll try to make it for the little bit of the Azure Cafe. I do have some stuff to attend to, but I will spend some time there for a few minutes.
Cool. And it's a late night there, am I right? Or an early morning?
No, it's barely 11 a.m. here, so
Oh,
it's still a bit early, and I've got a whole full day ahead of me.
oh, me and time zones. I just make them up as I go along, I think. Okay, well, thank you, Jay. And hey, you're back.
Yes, I'm back. And thank you, Jay, for this very interesting session. And thank you again, Emma, for hosting and doing the Q&A. Yeah, like you mentioned, we will have the Azure Snacks Cafe on Microsoft Teams right after this. It's non-recorded, and you can ask questions about the session, but also about Umbraco or anything else related is fine. Please be aware that there is a code of conduct, and please understand this code of conduct before you join in. You can find the code of conduct on the virtual.duke.nl website, and if Hank puts it there, also in the chat. We run a Microsoft Cloud Skill Challenge based on the 4 Azure Snacks we run this month. So if you pay attention to all of these and you go to the website virtual.duke.nl, you can find the link to the Cloud Challenge, and you can win some prizes from Microsoft there. So better pay attention and do this training courses. And since we make these available later on, these sessions available online later on the virtual.duke.nl website, you can always join in later and watch later and answer the questions after that. So as long as you do them before the end of the month, you should be fine, and we will be picking 3 winners for these. So I hope to see you all at the Azure Snacks Cafe after this, and also see you next week, where we will be talking about Azure networking. So looking forward to that as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.